Today, we hope to provide some insight and some tips to make sure that you can submit the best application possible that represents you, your unique self. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask them in the chat function, and we will address them at the end of our questions and answers session. We know a lot of you are still on your lunch hour, you're taking time out from work. Sorry about that. And we want to be as efficient as possible. So with that said, let's get going. We're going to cover a number of slides today. So let's start with some introductions. So throughout the session today, you're going to hear from 3 of us here at Rady. Gerard is also here. I didn't put him up on our screen, but there's 2 admission representatives for the 2 different two different options, the flex and the full-time. And we actually have a student who's a second year in our FlexEvening program who's here to help you. She also happens to be a wonderful part of our staff here at Rady. So Sherry, why don't you start and introduce yourself? That'd be great.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Thank you, Kristina. Hello, everybody. My name is Sherry Hu. I'm the Senior Assistant Director of MBA Admissions with focus on admissions, and also currently I'm responsible for advising full-time MBA prospective students. I've been with the Rady School for the past 7.5 years and in the graduate management education for over 12 years. Again, happy to be here, and thank you very much for joining us in this webinar.
And you heard from me already. My name is Kristina Cook. I'm the Assistant Director of Graduate Admissions here. I work primarily with the Flex students, but like Sherry, I've been in this industry for a little while, and I try to provide as much information as I can in general to anybody that's willing to listen to me. Amy, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Amy Quinn. So I'm the Graduate Admissions Coordinator for the MBA programs at Rady. I've been at Rady for 2.5 years now, and I started the Flex MBA program last fall. So this will be my 2nd year in the MBA program. So happy to answer any questions and looking forward to helping you with any of your applications questions as they come in.
Super, awesome. Okay, so first let's get started with some basics. You can see the application deadlines here on our slides, those for the full-time and those for the flex programs. Just so you know, our very first full-time deadline is coming up, yet there are many others. So just take a note of it. You can also find all of these on our website. I like to think of these as targets because we actually do have a rolling application policy. Once we kind of hit our first date, we do begin looking at things on a rolling basis. So if you submit something, let's say, for instance, you're a flex program and you submit on December 2nd, we're not waiting until February 1st to look at your application. We will look at it as soon as we can and as soon as it is complete. And we'll talk a little bit about what makes a complete file in a moment. But I do want to talk a little bit. Oh, please note that the international student deadline for both of the programs is in April. But yeah, I want to talk briefly about applying late. I typically advise our students, and especially the flex students, to avoid applying at the very last minute. And the reason is primarily for your comfort. When you do apply late, there still are a tremendous number of steps that the university needs to complete in order to have you be fully matriculated. And we are at those steps are out of Rady's control. And so there's a lot of waiting, and there's a lot of things that you need to do to prepare for orientation. And so if you can help it, I would avoid applying at the very end, just because it makes things rushed, and it's not it's not a calm way to start the program. So that with that said, we're going to kind of move on to our admissions philosophy. And Sherry is going to take it from here.
Thank you, Kristina. So again, we are very excited to give you this webinar. So our goal is to provide relevant tips for you to craft the best application you can. and to put your best foot forward in terms of applying to the Rady MBA. So we are here to help you. I think it's very useful for you to know our admission philosophy. And that's, you know, the bedrock of what we do at this office does. So first is read to admission. What does that mean? So when we look through each application, we are looking for reasons to admit you, not for reasons to deny you. This is very important. Maybe this is not something you think about when you put in an application to a prestigious institution like us. I want you to understand that there's an entire team of people who are looking for positives within your application file and not the negatives. So we are an office of admission, not an office of denial. So see why, that's why 4 of us are here. We are here to support you. So just, you know, to be transparent here. So many applicants have come up to me before and scared about one component of their application, saying, oh, this is weak, I have a C in this class, I have employment gap. So how does that bode for my candidacy? So please understand that we are a holistic admissions office. So this is our second very important philosophy, holistic admission. What does that mean? So that means, you know, your application is read in a holistic manner because we believe the sum of your humanity is not, you know, a 3 months gap in your career or a C for your calculus class in your freshman year. So that means all parts of your application are looked at and evaluated equally. There's no percentage or weight assigned to a specific category. And it is truly about getting to know you as a whole person, and all of those different attributes and your stories specifically are very important to us. So I'm going to talk a few different areas that we are looking at when we evaluating a application. And Kristina will expand on the traits and the qualities that we like later. So first, we look at your intellectual ability or academic preparedness. We are looking for indicators for potential success in the classroom because we want to make sure that everyone coming into the Rady can handle the rigor of the classroom. Second, your professional experience or work experience. We are looking for the quality of individual experience since everyone's background is unique and different. And we want to know what you have done and accomplished in your career and how does it compare to your peers? How does your path inform your goals for your future? And we also want to have a good sense of what your goals are. We feel it's very important to understand your particular story and why you need the MBA and where you are hoping it will get you. So getting an MBA is not about checking a box. We want to know why the degree is the right one, why Rady is the right place for you. And part of it is also talking about what is you want to do post MBA and making sure that the next step makes sense and is realistic, attainable for you. You know, there are many traits and qualities we like. Here, I'm going to just highlight 2. One is leadership. You know, so while we want to hear about demonstrate leadership experience, we also look for potential because we understand that most of you applicants are still building out that skill set. And if you are someone who are still early in your leadership experience, are you someone has a desire to further cultivate those skills while at the Rady School? We certainly hope so. And the second is EQ, which is a hard word, and basically it's interpersonal skills that we are looking for. So we are not trying to assess whether you are an introvert or extrovert. We are both here. So our community values collaboration, involvement, and giving back. So we want to make sure that we select people who will thrive in this type of environment. So present your, when you interact with us or with our alum or current student, we connect you to, just present yourself, as who you are, and be nice. Okay, that's I will stop here.
Yeah, we all know being nice is just the way to go. I'm sure you would all agree. Sherry, you can continue along this, or I can address it. It's up to you. Process. I'll go for it. How's that?
Okay.
I'll do it. Okay, so yeah, I'm picking up where Sherry left off with the process. Essentially, it's pretty straightforward. You submit an application. It does need to be complete, and I mentioned that I would discuss that briefly. Amy will actually talk a little bit about what a complete application requires, but if you, for whatever reason, submit an application, there's still a few items that are missing, we will wait until those items are submitted before we begin to review your application. And so it's okay to submit early. Let's say you're missing some letter of recommendation, or a transcript hasn't come in, etc. No big deal. You should just know that we will wait until it's complete before we actually start the review process. So once we do have a complete file, the first step is really to evaluate you for an interview, because all admitted students and all students that apply are considered for this step. Those that we decide we want to move forward will be granted an interview, and that step is easy to set up. We ask you to sign up for a time. You have an interview, and at this point in time, we are still doing these by Zoom. Hopefully, by the end of the year, we'll do some in person. But I'm sure you understand. After the interview, your file will be taken to an admissions committee, and that is composed of a number of people of our staff, as well as faculty and other leadership within the college. Within that, the whole goal of the admissions committee is to decide whether we will nominate you for admission to the University of California at San Diego. What that means is, if we do the nomination, that we want you, the program wants you, but every student that every graduate program wants on campus must be approved by the graduate division of UCSD. And so while we nominate you, we send your file to the graduate division, and they make the final decision. And that, so just so you know, it is a slightly different meaning, but typically those that we nominate, we have a lot of confidence in that will be admitted by the university. And the way it works is you will find out if you're nominated, if you're waitlisted, or you're denied at that time. If you are nominated, we will let you know. Once we hear back from the graduate division, that is when we send you the official admissions letter. And if you were awarded any fellowship money at that time, you will be notified. So any sort of the big final steps will be notified at the very end. And so that's just slightly a two-part process that you should be aware of. Very typical of big institutions. So I'm sure you've heard some of this before. Amy is actually going to talk a little bit about our checklist, and that will, these are the items that you do need in order to have a complete file. Go for it, Amy.
Hello, everyone. So as I mentioned earlier, as in my role, I will be helping you, go through the application. And so if you have any questions, so this is just a general checklist of what we will be needing on your application. And as we go through this webinar, we'll be going more in depth into each of these individual items. But just to point out, so this is an online application. So for your transcripts, we'll need only unofficial at this point. But later on in the process, if you are admitted and you decide to accept, that is when we will need official transcripts. So at this time, just unofficial transcripts. And then we'll need your resume, some recommendations. There will be some essay questions. Depending on the program, we'll need your GMAT or GRE scores. And if you're an international applicant, then we will need a TOEFL, IELTS, or PTE score for English proficiency tests. Okay.
I'm going to clarify that too. So the program right now that requires the GMAT or the GRE is the full-time program. The Flex program has waived that requirement this year, with one caveat. If there is a question about one's ability to manage the quantitative component of the program, we may ask some people to take one of those tests to demonstrate that capacity. But that's on a very, one-on-one basis that we discuss later in the process individually with the candidate. I think Amy's going to continue on along with the application.
Yeah. So like I said, so the basic application is just going to be asking for your information, your name, address, academic history, employment history, any activities or awards that you received. So during the employment history, so a best practice is to try to explain if there are any job transitions. Maybe you have a gap in one job to another, try to explain what that gap is. And don't worry if there's already something that's on your resume. You don't need to go quite as in-depth on your application because we can read that on your resume. And then complete the online application while you're continuing to work on, getting your recommendations in, trying to get your transcripts in. So just do that all simultaneously.
Yeah, especially those essays. You want to give a little bit of thought to those, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. I am going to talk. Oh, yeah. Wait, there you are. You're still in academic records. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So it's not a surprise that we're going to need your transcripts. Amy mentioned earlier that we only need your unofficial transcripts for our team to make a decision. If you are admitted and decide to come, the university will require those official transcripts before the first day of class. Most schools have this down pretty easily. It's a digital send, not a big deal. One thing I should note, for those of you that have advanced degrees, even PhDs, we still need your undergraduate. We need all of your transcripts. We definitely need your undergraduate transcript, even if you have a PhD from UCSD. That is just the way this works. And we do need any additional transcripts, for instance, a community college transcript if you took a summer class or if you were a transfer student. We need all of the transcripts for those classes that contributed to your degree. And so if you, let's say you took a couple classes somewhere, we need those transcripts. Just so you know, get that out of the way right away, because it's not always fun to go tracking them down, but it's totally possible, and you should just know in advance what we're looking for. And for those students that are international, where the degree conferred is not noted on your transcript, we do need your diploma or your degree certification document. So best practices, we've already talked a little bit about this. The one thing that, keep in mind, if you have done any additional training, whether you've done Coursera classes or you have additional work training or certifications, please submit those as well if you have any sort of record of them. Again, back to the holistic approach, we are looking at you as a whole person. And, it demonstrates intellectual curiosity and motivation if you're continuing to educate yourself beyond, the formal schooling. Okay. Recommendations. Let me make sure I didn't skip that. Resume. I'm not even at the resume. Okay, sorry about that, guys. I'm going to continue to talk about resumes. So no surprise, an MBA does focus quite a bit on work experience, not only prior to starting, but after. That's just what we do. So having a resume that is updated, that is succinct and properly formatted is very important. Take some time to look over resumes online. If you're unfamiliar what a business resume looks like, please take a little bit of time. There's a million places to search online that will demonstrate that. There's not one right format, but we do ask for you to keep it to one page if you have less than 10 years of experience. That should not be difficult. We don't need to know every little duty that you've done while you're in your position. Those are just job functions. We want to know the accomplishments and some of the big, the big movers, as I should say. obviously we need all your personal information on that. We need to know your name, your address, contact information, and things like that. Best, how we like to look at it, and this is very traditional, as you will find when you look online, we'd like to see things in reverse chronological order. So education, we want to understand what your education is. We want to understand what your work experience is. And I'll talk briefly about that, but work experience, we want to know, what was your role? Who did you work for? How long did you work for? And possibly where you were located. And then of course, the major accomplishments that you had while there. And finally, there's a little bit of most of them will have an additional section. And we like that because that demonstrates you beyond just your work. Please note anything unique or interesting about you that you think will be relevant to our committee. Personally, I like to see those things because then I identify you're human, and it's also a great way to make a connection with people, for instance, because we're all human and we have our own we have our own things going on and our own interests. And it's a nice way to connect if we happen to have some of the same ones. So that's that. Best practice with a resume. So I did say there's not one right way to do a resume, but there are some things that you can do to kind of make it stand out. So first of all, I mentioned before in the formatting, try to make it easy to read. We mentioned in the last slide, it said a Times New Roman font 12 point is preferred. It doesn't have to be that way, but we do want it to be clear and legible. I know there are some folks that like to do the creative thing and cut it up in a puzzle and have us put it back together and, put all sorts of pictures. That's cool, really fun, but not necessarily a good one for an MBA application because we want to see it, we want to understand what you did, and we want it to be clear. If you're confused about that, there's the 70-10 rule, which means about 70% of your resume is work experience. 10% is your education, and then 20% is, everything relevant about you that isn't in your work experience or in your education. When it comes to the bullets, focus on what you've accomplished than just what your day-to-day duties are. Ideally, if you can quantify those accomplishments, that's the best. Sometimes it's not possible, but if it is, do try. And we're really looking to see the impact that you've made in your organization. What I like to tell people and how I view my own resume is, the question I like to ask is, I don't want to talk about my duties because that's part of the job. That should be included in the job title, ensued. I like to ask, so, okay, how is my department or my team or my organization, why is it a better place now as a result of my presence? What did I do to make change? How will I leave that? What did I do to really change it up? And those are really true accomplishments because that demonstrates not only what you're passionate about, demonstrate your initiative, and also, just what you did beyond the day-to-day requirements of the position. Recommendation, oops, I'm not going to go into that. So I did go through the best practices. I'm sorry about that. If you have any questions about the resume, please submit them in the chat and we'll discuss it at the end of the Q&A section. Amy, do you want to go through some of these, or Sherry, do you want to go through some of these recommendations? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. So actually, to be exact, it's two recommendation forms are required in the Rady MBA education. So we ask you to provide your recommender's name, relationship to you and the current position and email. So the system will trigger a link for your recommenders to fill in. So we ask your recommenders to assess some of your competencies, including, along the lines of, initiatives, communication, collaboration, team work, integrated, etc. Then we ask your recommenders to choose 2 out of 5 questions to provide short answers. So if your recommender wish to attach a long letter, that's also possible. We provide space for that. So what is the best practice? So we prefer professional letters of recommendation provided by employers, supervisors, or others who are able to comment on your professional goals. And if you are just fresh out of college and your educational goals as well. So letters, we also know some applicants are unable to approach a current supervisor for a recommendation. Previous supervisors, clients, or project managers, team lead, maybe good alternatives. If you don't choose a current supervisor, just let us know why. Make sure your recommenders are someone who can speak of you highly, professionally, and also academically, if that one happens to be a professor. And remind them to be specific and also include examples. Don't just say, oh, he has good leadership skills or she's a good team player. I think it's also a good idea to help your recommenders to understand why you are interested in pursuing a MBA, what your career goals are, and why Rady is a good fit for you. But a note of caution here, meeting with your recommenders and making sure they understand your goals is terrific. Writing any part of the recommendation is not. So make sure you pick people who take the time to do you justice. Someone who asks you to write any part of your recommendation letter is not your best choice. I think that's the key points I try to make for this part.
That's a really good point. It's some people are so busy, they do want you to write them a letter, or they want you to provide them, word for word what they should say. They probably just don't have the time to do it, so you should look elsewhere. But I do want to talk a little bit about time management when it comes to these recommendations. What I suggest is, as soon as you get, you start your application online, you can move throughout the applications, through different pages without having to complete the one prior. So I advise students to, once they get the okay from these recommenders, the verbal of commitment, I advise them to enter all of this information, their name, everything Sherry talked about, so they actually receive the link in advance. And so it's not the last step. Let's say you've completed it all. Oh, I need to put their letters in, because then you're waiting for them. And these are busy people. And sometimes, there's a couple other things I'm going to address, but then you're waiting for them, and that's just not a good time. So if you take it right off the bat, let them know that you sent them the link, check with them about a week later to make sure they received it. Sometimes it does go to people's junk folder. And you can always check with us to see if one has completed their recommendation. The other tip that I have is I would inform your recommender that they're not required to write a letter from scratch. That can be somewhat of a time-consuming task, and I think sometimes people may put that off until they have enough time, and for really, really busy people, that is hard to find. So I advise letting them know how it's going to work. They're going to receive a link, they're going to be brought into a portal, and they will be answering direct questions. That is less of a daunting task, and I think people are more likely to complete that recommendation than put it off. Essays. Okay, so essays. There's a couple different types of essays that we look for, that we have in our application. The first, we just basically have some short answer questions, like, for instance, what do you want to do after obtaining your GPA? What is your goal? What do you hope to achieve, like, right away and long term? And in the event that your GPA was below a 3.0, can you please explain why and explain the circumstances? The reason why we ask for that is the UCSD does have a policy that graduate students have a 3.0 GPA for admission. With that said, there are exceptions. And we want to know why, because as Sherry said, if you had a C in calculus your freshman year, because it was the first time you were set free, yeah, it's pretty understandable. Or maybe something happened, maybe you were sick, maybe you took some time off. You're all people. For most of you, your undergrad experience was a little while ago. And so we just want to understand why. That's basically it. The optional essay is, and it is optional, but it's a pretty easy one to answer, so I would do it. It's like, what would you like your future classmates to know about you that isn't in your application? You know, something, maybe it's something that you were like an Olympic athlete or something like that, you know, or you have a crazy passion from jumping out of planes, things like that. The one thing, the other thing I like to tell students, and this is true for most MBA programs, but especially for us, when you're answering these, you know, the short answer questions, and even, you know, in the longer essays, keep in mind that we want to know that, you know, the answers to the following questions. Why do you want an MBA? Why do you want it now? And why do you want to come to Rady? You know, specifically this last question is going to require you to do some research, and, you know, you will be asked to tie some of our strengths into your goals. And that's the way we know you're a good fit for us. It also makes you really think about what you're trying to accomplish. And I think, you know, self-knowledge is the key. It enables us to really understand you and then, you know, help you clarify your own goals as well. Gosh, okay. So getting into the essay details. So we have the required. These are kind of a little bit longer essays that can ask you specific questions as they relate to you and your connection with Rady. The first one is, you know, explain how the Rady MBA is going to help you achieve your goals, short-term and long-term. And we want also for you to draw from your own experience tied to one of our, you know, founding principles. And they are community focused, being community minded, focused, collaboration. We are data driven, and we really want our students to have a lasting impact, not only in the program, but in the community in which they proceed to live and work upon graduation. Best practices for any essay is be clear, be concise, have a couple different people read it over, be authentic, because we really do want to know who you are. You know, we've read tons of essays where people tell us what they think we want to know, and we read the same one from a lot of different people. So we really just want to know what you're about. And we want to understand if you're able to do, you know, what kind of work you're able to do. We are quantitative, so we do like to understand and know, you know, do you have this sort of background? We like to understand if you've had an unusual or different experience working with diverse people. And the best way to answer these is with an example. And the reason why, you know, it is the best way is because most people believe that past behavior is pretty predicative of future behavior or past performance. And so if you can provide examples, we will really get a sense of, you know, okay, is this what this person is going to do in the future? And there's an interview technique called the STAR, you know, technique. Some of you may have heard about it, but essentially it's the same thing. When someone asks you to provide a real example, you want to, you know, briefly discuss what the situation is. What is the task? What needed to be done? What did you do? The action, ultimately, what was the result? That's just an overview. You don't need to address all those questions, but keep that in mind when answering these kind of questions. And I'm going to leave the test scores and all the goodies up to Amy to discuss with you.
All right, thanks, Kristina. So as Kristina mentioned a bit earlier, the GRE and GMAT has been waived for our Flex MBA students. But for those who are applying for the full-time MBA, we still do require your GMAT or GRE scores. So these scores have to be within the past 5 years for them to be valid. And the exams must be taken on or before the deadline. So while we don't have a minimum requirement, we do want you to take a look at our student profile to see what the average score is, just to get an idea of what score you should be aiming for. And you can submit the unofficial copies of scores for your application, but we will need the official scores when we go to nominate any applications for admission. And for the Flex applicants who do have a GMAT or GRE score they would like to submit, please feel free to submit those as well. We are happy to take those, especially if you think that it'll only boost your application. And then so next I'll talk about the English proficiency tests for our international students. Okay, awesome. So so these test scores are for students who are international students who are applying to UCSD. So will take the TOEFL, IELTS, or PTE. And they're valid from the last 2 years. So for these tests, we actually do have minimum requirements. Let's see. So for the TOEFL, to be required for graduate admission, the minimum score is 64 for the paper delivered test and 85 for the internet-based test. And for our IELTS, the minimum score is 7. And so we do not waive the requirement for international students whose undergraduate degree was primarily taught in English in a country whose dominant language is not English. So you have to have gone to an institution where in the country where the dominant language is English in order to be waived for this requirement. And again, for this test requirement, we will take the unofficial test scores, but we will eventually need the official scores as well. I don't know if Kristina or Sherry had anything else to add for these.
You know, not really. I think it's just important to note that, you know, take your time, don't rush an application if you feel like you're going to have to rush your test preparation. It goes for the GMAT and GRE as well. Mm-hmm. So we have a very experienced interviewer here. Her name's Sherry. You've heard from her. She's going to discuss kind of the interview process and what we're looking for.
Thank you, Kristina. So the process is also kind of, you know, straightforward. So all interviews are by invitation only. You get, you know, invite and have you to select a slot that will work for you. Also, you know, interview is required in order to be admitted, or, you know, admitted needs to be basically interviewed by one of the committee members. Currently can be online, you know, or in person when, you know, when it's allowed. We are always welcome you to come on campus to be interviewed. So it's typically an hour long. So we conduct a mission interview like a job interview. So I would guess, you know, most of you have done job interviews before. So the basics, just get prepared. You will, you know, read your cover letter, resume before you come to a job interview, right? So here we encourage you to reread all your entire applications before when you prepare for this interview. What's important is really, you know, think deeply about your UVP, your unique value proposition. That is what is you, what is your brand? So you don't want to be just a potato in a sack of potatoes, right? Think hard about what really makes you stand out. So how do you do that? Basically, you have to do your research, you know, understand, you know, what Rady has to offer specifically to you, and why our program is the best fit for you, what courses, you know, clubs, activities you most interested in. You know, before, you know, you come to, you know, I hope, you know, you've talked to us, you know, one of us, or talk to a current student or any of our alumni, and really research your career goals. You know, talk to people in those roles that you think you want to be in a post-MBA, and educate yourself really well before you sit down, you know, actually before, you know, writing your application, and before you know, when you prepare for the interview. Really because we really want to know you. So tell your story very well. You know, we encourage you to tell your story, you know, where you have been, what you are doing now, and where you want to go, and use the whole, you know, the application and interview opportunity to tell that story. I hope, you know, each, you know, part tell a different, something different, you know, you know, we ask you about your goals on application, right? Then during interview, we'll still ask you those questions. We will ask for sure, I can tell you now, and be ready to articulate why you want to pursue those goals, and try not to use the same example over and over again, and be yourself. don't tell us what you think we want to hear. Tell us what makes you you. So yeah, like you prepare for a job interview, right? You want to do a mock interview before you put yourself in front of your hiring manager. So practice out loud, with somebody, who maybe didn't, don't know you that well. So he will probably give you some feedback on, does that, actually, did you make your point you try to make? So that's that. Also, I think Christina has made a good point, right? Also use the star format when you are asked a behavioral sort of interview questions.
Yeah, and getting to the point with Sherry about, I think Sherry, about practicing out loud. It's always best if you can find someone that will be watching you and give you some honest feedback. But you can also videotape. Gosh, I'm aging myself. You can use your camera and record yourself answering questions. And I guarantee it is not the funnest experience to watch yourself, but you actually can learn a lot. And you can learn a lot about yourself. You can learn a lot about your diction. And, it's just a good idea to cover all bases when you're looking to go in an interview. Because as Sherry said, we want to know who you are. We all know that you're unique. And this is your chance to really sell yourself and tell us who you are. So take the time and, throughout the process, as Sherry mentioned, you're going to be learning a little bit about yourself. You probably didn't really think about too much. And all of those discoveries and all of those steps along the process are going to help inform you for the interview. So we are finishing up here. Just some basic best practices in terms of the overall application. As Sherry mentioned earlier, we are looking for reasons to admit you. We are not the office of denial. Our goal is really to help you through this process and to help answer questions and support you. As I mentioned with the test scores, make sure you submit your application when you're ready and when you feel you presented your best self. Don't rush it to meet a specific deadline, unless, of course, it's the very last deadline. Make sure that you read instructions. We all know how that goes. Instructions well, it doesn't usually turn out so awesome. So make sure you read them, follow instructions. And again, be yourself. We like to know more than just your academic or your professional experience. And think of us as your advocate. As mentioned before, we're just really here to help you and provide guidance. And I think with that, unless anyone else has something to say, I think we're going to go into our questions and answer session. Is everyone good? Is my team good? Okay, excellent. Okay, so thanks so much for being patient for those of you that have sat through this, and also for those that submitted your questions in the chat. So why don't we get started? I think Amy's going to read some questions out, and then we can answer some of them.
Perfect.
Amy, did you see any specifics?
Yes.
Kind of repeated.
Well, so there was one question about for the recommendation. Would you prefer have a preference over a previous supervisor, an undergrad professor, or a colleague?
I would prefer a previous supervisor if you feel they can speak to your strengths. Sherry, would you agree?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, right? Somebody know you in professional setting, knows your professional accomplishments, and your goals. So if your current supervisor, maybe you just take on a new job, maybe previous supervisor, but if you've been working under one supervisor for more than a year, so I think we'd prefer from your current supervisor. So professor, recommendation only for those, who just graduated from college, haven't started a full-time job yet.
Awesome. So we have another question about resumes. So if someone has over 10 years of experience, like what is the recommended length for their resume?
I would just try to stick to 2 pages. I'm at that place in life where I have over 10 years experience too, and it's perfectly fine to have a 2-page resume. I didn't mention this earlier, but there are, for those academics and those in the health sciences and medical professions, a CV is absolutely fine. That is the typical presentation of skills in that particular industry. So feel free to submit your CV as well. CVs are uniformly very long, so it is a separate category, but if you're looking at just your basic business resume, I would limit it to 2 pages.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristina.
Yeah, again, remember you're submitting this resume for a B school, admission, so please, make it relevant to, to the MBA admission, process. So we are not like a hiring committee hiring you for a research job or, faculty job. So yeah, you don't have to actually, attach a long list of, publications or, patents or things like that, condense it for us, make our job easier.
Perfect. Thanks, Sherry. So there were a couple questions about fellowships. People were wondering generally how much fellowship is given to a Flex MBA student versus a full-time MBA student.
I think Sherry can handle that one.
So we offer merit-based fellowship, based on overall strength of your application to both full-time and a flex, because there's a different pools, right? So by default, flex students are working professional, therefore have income. So the award size, there's a difference in size. The award to full-time are bigger generally, versus to flex students. So the amount varies, can be a few thousand to tens of thousands. Again, it depends on which program you apply for and also the overall strength of your application. You don't have to submit a separate application for that merit-based fellowship. But in this new cycle, we do ask you to submit a short essay for our donor designated fellowship. So please just follow the instructions. So I think we have very clear direction put on the online application. You can see which you are eligible for. I think generally about over 80% of full-time admitted students got our fellowship. For the flex, over 60% of admitted students got the fellowship.
Awesome. Thanks, Sherry.
Yeah. I see a question about waiving the GRE, the GMAT. That's if you're obviously talking about the full-time program, I do believe there are some limited reasons why you can have it waived. For the most part, we do not waive them. You said you have 7 years of experience. Sherry, can you provide the exceptions where we would actually waive the GMAT for?
So like Kristina already mentioned, we waive the GRE GMAT requirement for all Flex MBA applicants. So for full-time applicants, we only waive the GRE GMAT requirement for those who have obtained a MD degree from a US institution, MD or PhD from a US institution. Am I clear?
Thank you, Sherry.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, nobody wants to take the GMAT. Like, we all know that because we've all taken it. It's not a good time. But it's part of the deal. And if you do go to business school, there's going to be some things you probably don't want to do that you're going to have to do. So sorry. So go ahead.
I would echo what Kristina mentioned earlier. We do encourage those flex applicants considering taking a GRE or GMAT if your undergrad GPA is below 3.0.
Yeah, that just enables us to make a stronger case to the graduate division if indeed we really want you on our program. I think there was a question about an exception case. If we're talking about an exception case, for instance, if the GPA is lower than what what the university is requiring, is there anything other than the GRE or the GMAT that one would be required to submit? I believe that is would be very unique to you and your own situation, which you can definitely discuss with your admissions advisor at that time. But let's think positive. Let's think positive that, you know, you're not going to need it. If you do, it's never a bad idea to prepare. So, so thanks for that question. Gosh, let's see. Have that.
I had one direct question towards me, but I think this could be for everyone. So this student was wondering, like, what's the difference between applying in round 1 versus, you know, round 4? And are there any differences?
Oh gosh, sorry.
So,
I'm reading another question. Sherry, yeah.
of course, you know, as you are aware, right, if you're thinking about the fellowship funding pool, once we start to award them, and we award them well as we, you know, are making admissions offers. So the pool start to dwindle, right? Of course, if you know that the benefits of apply early because, you know, we have a bigger funding pool. And the other is, you know, if those of you who are full-time applicants who are thinking of applying on-campus housing, you should submit as early as possible because, you know, usually graduate housing on campus is very tight. You want to put yourself on the wait list as early as possible. And there are many, many other benefits. So if, for example, there will be an onboarding process. There are many, you know, information forms you need to submit. You know, of course, you know, the earlier you are ready to, you know, to be on board, of course, you know, it's better for you to apply early.
Yeah.
But again, you know, my advice would, you know, submit your application when you feel it's the strongest and as early as possible. When you think about, I think it also ties to the question, you know, somebody asked about the fellowship, right? Because it's merit-based. So we do holistic evaluation around your academic excellence, you know, professional accomplishment and promise, and also, you know, traits that we like. So test scores also, you know, is an important element in weighing of the fellowship. So if you can take the test to demonstrate your academic preparedness, that will basically a edge, you know, strengthen your application.
Yeah, so having the opportunity to get feedback and also take the time to prepare is useful. I do want to just verify and also comment that if there's a really qualified applicant and they apply in round 4 versus round 1, you know, your admission, the capacity of admission, you know, we will look at strong applicants and admit the right applicants at any particular time in the process. The fellowship, you know, kind of that might differ. And, you know, it's easier on you if you apply a little earlier, just so you don't have such a crazy on-ramping at the end of the deal. But if you're asking, like, are you going to be penalized for, you know, applying late? In terms of admission, absolutely not. And we had a question about on-campus housing. Sherry mentioned earlier, like, you know, if you are really about on-campus housing, you want to start right away. I don't believe you need to be a student to put your name on that list. So I would try, because it can be, you know, it can take up to a year. Am I incorrect in saying that, Sherry? Do we need to be a student? I think they encourage people.
I think so. Yeah, you need to be admitted. You need to be admitted.
Okay, well then that's actually answers that question. Thank you.
And only full-time, not part-time. Only full-time students are eligible, you know, for on-campus housing.
Right. With that said, full-time is a term that's used to describe a student taking a certain number of credits, as well as describing our full-time MBA program. If you are a weekend candidate for their Flex program, you will be taking a full load. So theoretically, you're considered full-time and you could qualify to live on campus. I just want to make that clear. The evening program, you're typically taking fewer than 12 credits, which is considered a full-time load. But, you know, most of the people in the weekend, they really would prefer to live where they're living than come on campus. If the GMAT score is lower than the class average, is it going to hurt that person's chance of admission?
Again, as I mentioned, you know, we do holistic admission, you know, score is just one element, right? We do holistic. So, if you have very, very strong professional experience and background, and, you demonstrate yourself a very like motivated, so it probably won't hurt as much.
Right. So yeah, everyone is around, has a circle, some parts are going to be a little less strong than others. So you kind of have to look at all of it, but put your best, put your best foot forward, put the best of you in all of those areas, forward. And the best way to do that really is to take time with your application. And, the GMAT is always, if, the subject for all MBA students, they are always asking questions about it. You want to do the best you can. It's hard to answer the question like, what is our minimum? We don't have a minimum. We have an average, and we look at each candidate separately. So we just say, shoot for the best you can. If you decide, hey, I want to do better, and you want to try again, absolutely go for it. You're certainly not penalized if you send us one score and the next score is higher. It's not anything. We just want to take the highest score that you have.
Yeah, I also would add, if you think your score is weak, is not the best part, you need to then make other parts of your application stand out, right? Then emphasize what you can bring to the community, what you can add value to the Rady MBA, your class.
And I think there was, Sherry, another question about the GMAT, talking about what percentage, like how much weight does it have in the application itself in terms of being evaluated?
As I mentioned earlier, we don't assign a weight to any category of your application.
Okay. Is there a time frame where the Flex MBAs need to be completed? For instance, if our company gives educational assistance, but only a certain amount each year, can we take fewer credits each term so that amount is covered? That's a really good question. We've actually had a couple of students that presented something similar. For the weekend program and the evening program, we have a sort of designated period of time that we want you to complete your degree. The weekend program is a 24-month program. You go to school basically straight for 24 months and then you're done. The evening program is a little bit longer because you're taking fewer classes per quarter, and that turns out to be about a 10-quarter program. We really don't want someone to extend it. That just creates problems in all different levels. You're certainly able to accelerate the degree and take more classes a quarter than sort of the general guidelines. But there is something to be said about, and this gets technical that you meet with me about, but it depends upon when your company is, are they using a calendar year or their fiscal year to award money? And then there's questions about, well, do they pay you after you've taken the class or when you registered and when you have a bill due? So those are things we can all talk about in person and get into the details. But it's a very good question, and I have some answers for you. We are getting past the hour. We promised we'd get you back to your place, wherever you may be. You can see our emails on the screen now. Please jot those down. If you are unable to do that, you can always find us online. We're all over the place. You can, click the find more information button on the main website. You're going to find us. You can look under the people section of our website and look under staff and find us. We do hope you will contact with us, and we do hope you'll apply. So thank you very much for attending, and thank you for sharing your afternoon with us. If you have more questions, please follow up. All right. Thanks, everybody. We're going to end now.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, we encourage you to keep continue to engage with us.
All right.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Have a great
Thank you.
afternoon. See ya.